Welcome, and thank you for joining us at Live at Your Table today. Before we get started with our discussion, we would like to share some housekeeping items to keep in mind. All audience members are on listen-only mode, which means you are muted. We will be monitoring audience engagement on the dashboard and do encourage you to participate by using the question pane. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available online in the coming week. Now, without further delay, let me introduce Dan Murphy with the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. Thank you, Dan, for being with us today. Please take it away.
Good morning, Renee. Thank you. Before we get started, I just want to ask, is there any press on the line? Do we have anybody from the press? If you are, please identify yourself or indicate in the chat room before we get started. Okay, Carol, I think what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and get started. Carol, we're going to start with you, and then Lisa, then John. Will you please introduce yourself real quick? Tell us about your background. Carol?
Certainly. Good morning. I'm Carol Dover, President and CEO of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. And I cannot thank you enough for taking time. This is so out of the box for everybody. You know, I'm used to, let's say, this would have been the 26th or 7th year, Dan, that we would have stood there this year with the John and Lisas of the world and cut the ribbon. And it seems so odd, you know, to get up and not be walking across the street from the hotel to what we're so used to doing. But this is the new normal this year. Hopefully next year we'll be able to see you in person. But again, thank you for your commitment and dedication to the show and to coming in this morning to listen to a very important issue. John?
Well, good morning, and again, thanks everybody. I appreciate everybody taking the time this morning to join us. My name is John Horn. I own 4 restaurants in Bradenton, Florida. We're celebrating our 25th year as the Anna Maria Oyster Bar. So we're proud to be part of this industry. It's a phenomenal industry that we all just absolutely adore. And Carol's right, it is odd being not being in Orlando this week. It's just strange, but we're glad that you've taken time to learn a little bit about Amendment 2, and we're looking forward to helping educate as many as we can. Lisa?
Thanks. I'm Lisa Lombardo. I'm the Chief People and Culture Officer of HDG Hotels. We're a hotel development and management company headquartered in Ocala, Florida, so just north of Orlando. We have 19 limited and select service hotels that stretch from the Gulf Coast across Central Florida and over to the Space Coast. And my office oversees human resources, payroll, and engagement internally, but we also handle government affairs and community relations externally. So this issue is near and dear to me from the internal perspective, but then also trying to help navigate and spread the word through our external engagement. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Carol, why don't you educate everybody what's going on with Amendment 2, please?
I will, but first, don't y'all just love Lisa's title? Like, who gets to get up? Chief People and Cultural Officer. That's what I want to be when I grow up one day. I love it. So again, thank you for taking time to hear this morning about a ballot amendment that's going to be on the November election. And soon, many of you will be receiving your mail-in ballots that could change the future or would change the future of our world drastically and forever, because it's going into the state constitution, which a lot of people have been, you know, curious about that. Like, you know, we have a legislature. Isn't this what the legislature should be doing? And the answer to that is yes. Here's the problem. Our Florida legislature would never increase our minimum wage to $15 an hour. So as things go anymore, you know, we have pregnant pigs in the state constitution. The smoking in restaurants went into the state constitution. You know, unfortunately, now the new way it is, if you can't get it done in the Florida legislature, you just raise over 722,000 signatures and you put it on the ballot. Well, that is the wrong way to approach public policy. But because it happened, you're going to be faced with it. So here's what Amendment 2, not to be confused with our Gun Rights Amendment 2, which you'd be surprised how many people do. This is going to be raising Florida's minimum wage. It will go into effect September 30th of 2021. And it was really very I want to say it was just written to trick you. I don't care what the other side says. It was written to trick you because you're going to see it only raises Florida's minimum wage to $10 an hour. That's what it looks like in the ballot. But the ballot language is here for you to see. That is true. It goes to $10.21, but it's the gift that keeps giving. It goes to 11 and 12 and then eventually to 15. And then guess what? Then it's tied to the CPI. So then every year it goes up. Well, let me tell you, if you want, we can go on to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about how this is going to impact our members. So most of you, I'm preaching a bit to the choir today because most of you understand tip credit and know that Florida still has a tip credit, AKA a cash wage. So here's a slide that just shows you what you would be paying, what you're paying now, what you would be paying. So today, with $8.56 an hour, your cash wage to tipped employees is $5.54. You can see that at the end of this, it will be almost $12 an hour. So it's about a 75% pay hike on your payroll for your tipped employees. But don't forget that as goes the front of the house, so goes the back of the house. So our suppression wages are, well, wait, you mean that the 17-year-old kid that just walked in the front door is getting $15 an hour and I've been with you like 5 years and I make $15 an hour? Well, then I want 20. And another thing is, don't let it them fool you. States that have tried to pass this have actually already been talking about $20 an hour. So this is a floor, not a ceiling. And you have to remember that we don't need a floor of $15 an hour. What are we going to do about our young labor force that, people forget? Minimum wage is not a living wage. Minimum wage is a starting wage. So this is, what is it going to do to our youth that we want to hire? I use this example all the time of a member of ours who owns an ice cream store. And she called me and she was like, Carol, she had tears in her eyes. She's like, I hire kids and I love to hire these kids after school. They come from school, they dip ice cream up and they do this as a summer job. I can't pay them $15 an hour. I will go under. She's like, that, it's $30,000 a year. Plus, oh, don't forget you have all of the, taxes that get added on. So if you're doing the math, just don't forget to add your 10+% in your taxes. So actually, perfect slide. So here is how you can figure it out. And by the way, we have a calculator on our website. We have a website dedicated just for this. It's called amendment2hurtsyou.com. But take a look here at this slide that's going to give you a comparison of today. So if you're just, I'm going to say an average employee, John, I know you're bigger and you've got more than 25 employees, but let's just do 25 employees. If your 25 employees worked their 40-hour work week and you had 12,000 tipped employee hours, and today you'll see on the 2020 column in black that your payroll, including your workers' comp and your taxes, is somewhere around $73,000, $75,000. Now, roll over to the yellow column where it's gone up to $15 an hour. And in the same exact scenario, your payroll went up $158,000, which is an 85,000. Well, okay, the slide's got a little bit of interesting zeros on it. I guess that could be considered $850,000 increase or $85,000. It's an $85,000 increase. We'll take that extra zero off. If we just want to tell you how bad it really is by adding zeros. But it's an $85,000 increase in your payroll. Now, also you can do the math there that could also be considered, if you run it out 40 hours a week, that could also end up being your quarterly increase. So if that's your quarterly increase, annualize it, you're over $350,000 a year in your increase in just your payroll. Many restaurants have said to me, that's my profit. Like I don't even make that in profit. So what are we to do? I'm going to turn it over in a minute, but a couple of things I want to just remind you about. I don't think we have the automation slide up here, but I want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we all know are happening. Many of you remember when gas stations had attendants and they weren't self-service. And Lord, I can't even imagine what my mom would have thought if all the grocery stores had these self-service lines, because we built relationships at our grocery stores with the attendants, which I still have at Publix. I can't stand these self-service. And it's fine to have one or two for somebody who needs to zip through. Now we're getting 8, 10, and 12 of them, Walmart, Costco. What's going to happen? We are going to end up having no choice but to automate. I've been to New York City. They passed this, and you're going to hear a lot about Seattle, Chicago, San Francisco, DC, where they had passed it in New York. I literally was there amongst a sea of iPads, and I have a screenshot of it we can do for a later date. That's on our website, I'm sure. But literally a sea of iPads. There was not a wait staff. I found one person, and you ordered, you paid, you did everything by iPad. That is not who we are, especially not in Florida. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I believe John is our next expert panelist. He is the expert because John lives this. He is a restaurateur, and he can really tell you how it's going to impact his business. So John?
Thanks, Carol. The increase is just tremendously going to impact us, because what are your sources? I mean, just as Carol said, that's my profit. I mean, or that's more than my profit in the store. So how do we recover this increase in payroll? Well, we raise prices. You have very, very few options. You raise prices, you cut hours, or you close the front door. There's not many choices to do it. So none of those are options any of us want. And our elasticity of menus in Florida, it's difficult for us to raise prices, and we certainly can't raise the menu that much to cover it. So yeah, you can take some of your bottom line and go to it, but you're going to start. This is our biggest concern, especially where we are, and we're so reliable on our retirees. They're not getting the 77% increase in pay. Their income is not changing. So if I increase my menu to cover all of these costs, they're not going to be able to eat with me as often as they do. So if my guest counts start dropping down, maybe my sales stay the same if I've increased my price, but if my guest counts start dropping, I don't need the same number of front of the house staff. I can do it with less servers. And guess what? I don't need as many back of the house staff as either. So that is where it's all going to come into it. Is we're going to have to start cutting hours and cut staff. And that's the last thing we want to do. We've got some long-term people with us. So, I mean, the numbers that we were looking at, 85,000 for a smaller restaurant, they're real numbers. Believe me, they're real numbers. Take your tipped hours and put them in. I never thought we paid minimum wage, but we do. We do, as far as the tipped employees are considered. So increasing them $1.44 right off the bat, it's just going to be detrimental to all of us. And it's going to be detrimental to our guests and our staff, not just us. You know, a lot of people like, come on, you're a restaurateur, pony up a little bit, John. You can share some of that with your staff. It's going to take all of us to educate our voters. And that's what we need to do with this. We need to educate as many voters as we possibly can. Here's a perfect example. Florida Tax Watch came out with the impact of this ballot measure. And what it's basically saying is, you know, we need to worry as a small business owner. We need to really worry. Some of the big guys and the you know, the Amazons, the Walmarts, their dollar per employee hour is just crazy compared to restaurants. So it takes us more hours of labor to produce what we produce in sales. So as I said, it's gonna force us to lay off people. It's gonna force us to cut their shifts. And look around your restaurant. I mean, yeah, okay, I may have one or two. I wouldn't mind, you know, not being with me, but I don't want to lose a single person. they've been with me too long, and I don't want anything to come out. So we've had 2 studies come out about the impact of this. So there's information on our website. You can get all of the information. It will cost jobs, it will cost hours, and it's just going to be horrendous on this. I mean, it's happened in Seattle. It's happened, like Carol was saying, the big cities, it's happening, and a lot of times they're looking at it and saying, what have we done? Restaurants have changed their models. They've gone to no tipping, they've added service charges, and they've paid everybody, front of the house, back of the house, they all pay them the same wage. So you're going to take a server who's making great money, and you're probably going to cut their pay in half. What kind of morale are you going to have in your restaurant when you take someone's ability because they're good, because they're great with staff, because they sell well, and they're good at their jobs? And then you're going to pay them, as Carol said, just like the person that comes in for the first time. So there's needs to be this incentive that we've always had in the hospitality industry. Why do we want to change the hospitality industry at all? We need to keep our jobs going. We need to stay competitive with Georgia, South Carolina. We don't need to start losing our conventions because the cost of conventions is going up. The consumer price will increase in everything in Florida. So we've got some great studies that these will help you and tell you all about it.
Lisa, you want to tackle the next couple slides, please?
Sure, absolutely, Dan. So as you can see here, there's a lot of losers on this side should the amendment to minimum wage mandated increase go into effect. And that includes, like Carol alluded to, our younger workers, for sure, that the incentive for us as employers to hire those folks who are going to get their first job finishing up high school or in college, because we're all going to need to bank on a sure thing that needs minimal training, minimal oversight, and can ramp quickly as a team member. So experience will begin to matter. And then it's just that unfair cycle of how you get experience if it's not for hiring somebody at that training wage. And certainly, of course, tipped workers with more than nearly 26,000 tipped jobs just disappearing just like that. One that absolutely breaks my heart, especially given where we sit here in Florida, is that our older workers, 2 sides, right? Those who maybe are working a few hours here and there just to make some extra cash or to stay busy, or just who can't quit working. Oh my goodness, I look forward to my future. This is going to be me. But the other side of that is that they're on a fixed income. There are many seniors who are on a fixed income, and who's giving them a rate increase as price of goods and services go up? So how do we close that gap? And as John alluded to, you may have wages increasing, but if the price of goods and services are also going up, we're just looking at inflation that stays like this, and that gap, you can't ever catch it or close it. And then the one that's really hard for me to look at and admit to myself is that women, that female workers, based on all of the impact studies that have been done, that will lose 2/3 of the estimated total jobs that are lost will come from that female side of the workforce. And in our industry, I can speak specifically about in the hotel and lodging side. For HDG hotels, we're looking at, in year 1, nearly a $1.5 million increase in labor costs, because we do have 19 hotels. So it's around $80,000 per property. So that calculation that Carol did in the previous slide is spot on in terms of what we're going to have to magically find unless we do increase the rate of the services that we're providing.
Hey, Lisa, before we go to the next slide, you have an employee that's working for you that came from Arizona, I believe. I think a lot of people looked at the tipped employee. They think it's all about restaurants. Tell me an example that you have in your group that you had. I think she's a younger female that came from Arizona.
Right. So Chalewa, she's a GM at one of our Spring Hill Suites by Marriott properties. And Chalewa had been a GM in Arizona, where they had implemented an increase to minimum wage, and it had stepped up to about $13 an hour. And she said, I worked for wonderful owners. But when that mandate kicked in, and there's nothing, again, that is helping them to be able to afford that increase in labor costs, it meant that she, as a GM, began working 80 hours plus a week, because she became the front desk attendant, the breakfast attendant, laundry attendant, and then the minimal number of labor hours that were allocated to housekeeping. So essentially you had a GM who wore multiple hats, and if she's wearing those hats, then that means those are folks who are no longer employed. Their jobs disappeared. And then of course with housekeeping. So she got the phone call from us and our company, and we offered her to come and take a position with us in Florida. And she said, the reason I moved cross country was because I did not see a way forward for me to grow in an industry that I love if I stayed where I was forever tethered to a property and to the front desk and could not further my knowledge and understanding of how things work administratively and at that the financial level. So we were able to bring her to Florida and create that opportunity for her here. She's thriving. She's become a mentor to so many of our other team members who are up and coming leaders, and all because that minimum wage hike took away the opportunity for others to have jobs, and it meant that she had to be those roles for this one property.
So Carol, we've heard all this. What's the FRLA? What are other business communities doing to fight this?
Sure. So first, let me say, Lisa, I met her the other day when I was in Ocala, and her story is amazing. And thank you for taking somebody like her with her talent and putting her in a job that she can flourish in. She just was so happy to be with you. So, so our plan of action, we've hired, and you may wonder, well, I haven't seen a lot. Well, we've actually been working on this issue for over a year now. It started June of 2019, and many people thought we were way too early. So we've hired 2 experts, Joe Clemens and Amanda Beavis. They have done numerous ballot initiatives, and they're helping us with our messaging, our earned media, our digital targeted media. We're about to get out in the mail a direct mail to chase the ballots piece, which that piece alone to go out to all 150,000 likely Republican voters that we need to hit cost us over $150,000 just for one mailer. We're doing radio ads. I've been on numerous, as many, John, Lisa, lots of people have been doing this on conservative talk shows, phone calls, phone banking. We're doing outdoor advertising. But what can you do? Any of you that are listening today surely have something in this list, whether it's a relationship with your local press or a radio talk show host, or if you don't, contact us, because we probably do, and could help us get the messaging out. It's just a ground game. This is all about getting the message out. Once people hear what it does to them, almost 100% of the time, they change their position on it. So we need your help, and we're pleading today. If you can write a check, please support us financially, because we are literally squeezing every little thing out that we possibly can to try to get enough money to get our message out, and it's expensive. So we need your help. That's where we, what we are pleading for today.
A couple things. We do have a webinar tomorrow or Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock if anyone wants to attend. We get into more of the detail strategy. This call's more like, hey, if you haven't heard about it, this is what it's all about. John, I'm going to kind of head over your way a little bit. What are you doing in your community? What are you doing as an association? You're the chair of this. What are you doing in your restaurant to educate folks about this?
Well, and that's so crucial for us, Dan, because we've got to talk to, look at the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry. We see 1 million people a day in our restaurants all over our state. So we can start by educating our clientele. You see the button I've got on, we've got our staff are wearing them in the restaurants. I wore them this past week, and I just made an effort to talk to as many of our guests as possible. And so many of them, like Carol was saying earlier, they haven't even heard of Amendment 2 because they haven't gotten ready to go to the poll. They know, they're commissioners and they know the presidential election, but they haven't looked at the amendments yet. So nobody's studied it. And it is the last thing we need is for voters to go to the booth without educating themselves about our amendments, especially too. Because if you go in, you're going to feel good, like, oh yeah, everybody needs more money. Gosh, what harm could that be? Let's just give everybody a little bit more money. And if you don't know the unintended consequences of raising the minimum wage, you're going to vote for it. So I can't stress how many people are unaware that this is on the ballot. So get out in your restaurants, talk to your guests. Lord knows, we don't want to talk politics at our dining tables, but this is crucial to all of us. We have to. We absolutely have to. And as I said, I mean, people would look and ask me about Amendment 2, and they're like, I didn't even know it was on there. And then when I gave them, I'm talking a 2-minute little elevator speech, if that, they were absolutely thumbs down. They were like, thank you for letting me know. So it's all about educating. So the grassroots, I mean, we've written op-ed pieces to go in the local newspapers. Anytime we talk to anyone that has a pen or buys their ink by the gallon, we drop Amendment 2 blurbs in there. It's so important. It is absolutely crucial that you get the message out any way you possibly can.
Lisa, what about you? What are you doing in your community out there? I know you're very active in your community.
So there are lots of associations, even beyond just the hospitality industry, that this is going to impact. So getting in front of your Rotary clubs, your local Republican clubs, and understanding how this will affect women, women's groups, whether Republican and politically affiliated or not, and inviting them to come into one of our hotels or our offices and roundtable and talk about this impact. The best thing that any one of us can do is to know our own story and how this is going to impact us. I shared our numbers. John could tell you right now, year one, how this is going to impact him. And being able to explain that ballot initiatives are like this would be a bad situation in a normal year, but this is not a normal time for any of our industries, but especially hospitality. So it's been very easy as a starter to be able to say, regardless of how anyone feels about minimum wage and where it should be, now is not the time for us to be experimenting with our economy. And as we're all still in the throes of COVID and a pandemic. So knowing how this will financially affect you, what this is going to mean to your business. And like John has said, and Carol and Dan have said, if you just tell one person your story, this catches on. But we do need to get in front of groups. There are all of these sites that FRLA has partnered with Amendment 2 Hurts You to bring to you. There's a YouTube channel. You can see Shalewa's story yourself. We videoed her telling her story. If you have a story on how this would impact you, we can certainly add that to the mix. But know how this will impact you and pass it along. We're depending on this grassroots effort and earned media to beat this.
And Dan, one of the things is there are restaurateurs and hoteliers that don't understand the impact, because we all have that mentality. I don't pay minimum wage. It's not,
right.
How does that possibly affect me? It is drastically going to affect all of us. So we all have to get our message out. There is no question about it.
And Dan, if I could just once, one of the things that I got asked by a reporter once was, how can you say that minimum wage where it currently is a living wage? And I flat out told him that was a misleading question, because a minimum wage is a training wage, an entry level wage, and a living wage is what we're paying our people. So to stop trying to intermingle those terms. So if there's one other way to go at this, it would be to encourage people to try to untrain folks from thinking that your minimum wage is synonymous with a living wage. It's two different terms.
Carol, question for you. We keep on mentioning Republican voters. How are we going to win this? What are the polls telling us? What do we have to do to beat this?
So it's a great question. The polls are still showing it around 65%. And Florida's a 60% state. So we only have to drop it down to 59.99. And it's doable, but it's not doable without everybody helping. And that's why we're pleading with you today. We have, 40 some odd days left, and a lot of work to do. But again, like I said, once people are educated about it, most of the time they change their position. So the fact that it is a job killer, it will hurt Florida's economy, and that this is not the time to do this with COVID are 3 easy sound bites, and we're asking each of you to reach out to as many people as you can, and that's what will help us pull it down below 60.
And last question, Carol, where are the legislators on this position, especially Republican legislators?
That's a great question. They're all, I don't know of a Republican legislator, including the governor and the cabinet, that are not with us. We have over 30 legislative surrogates that have signed up to help us either do op-eds or radio shows. Some of them are in pretty heated elections themselves. So in those cases, though we know where they philosophically are, we've kind of had to give them a pass because we have to get them reelected. That's so important. But the Speaker of the House, Chris Sprowls, and the Senate President Wilton Simpson are with us. Speaker designates Sprowls and Representative Joe Gruters are going to do a virtual media press conference for us probably next week. So our legislators are with us. Again, it's just getting the word out.
I got a few questions here, and we'll get to those in just a second. Any last minute comments? Lisa, one of the things I would recommend anybody on this call go to our website and watch the Simone video. Would you want to just hit on that real quick? Because if you show this video to your employees, they get it. Go ahead, Lisa.
They do. So between the Simone video and Simone telling her story of how this affected her in Seattle, and she was a progressive who thought this sounds awesome, and then it hit, and it meant she went from working one job 4 days a week, making well over the new minimum wage, to having to work 6 days with 2 different jobs and not making as much as she does. And that is on the YouTube channel for Amendment 2 Hurts You, as well as some other interviews. John has some interviews on his YouTube channel for Anna Marie Oyster Bar. HDG Hotels has some that are specific to us as well. So take a look at that. It's a great way to introduce it to your team members and then let them ask questions from there, because it's not just about the minimum wage hike, because once it goes up to 10, 11, and 12, the reason it costs us all so much money is because we can't leave folks who are already making 10, 12, 15, 17 at that level. We have to increase them as soon as that hike gets made along the way. So all of those things get discussed. Amendment 2 Hurts You and FRLA have some great resources. Use them to help as a conversation starter.
John, we have a real quick question for you, if you don't mind. So we only have a few minutes. If a restaurant implements the service charge concept, isn't that change taxable to the state?
Absolutely. Yes, if you put a service charge, no, if you just increase your your prices, absolutely. But they won't be getting the payroll taxes or the matching taxes as tips. They'll just be getting sales tax. So they're going to lose out on that. Won't be considered wages at that point. And what Lisa was talking about with raising the prices of everyone, people have asked, how can you get out in front? Aren't you worried about your staff saying, John, you're just trying to keep our wages down? When we've explained it in the Simone video, it's peer-to-peer, where she lost all her hours and the staff understands it completely, and the back of the house understands it as well. They understand that their hours will be cut. You may get a raise, but your hours are going to get cut, so your take home is going to be less. So you don't have that issue of having to worry about your staff thinking you're just trying to keep their wages down.
Renee Wolf, I know you're on the phone. We actually have Simone on a webinar tomorrow. Is that correct? You want to tell everybody about it real quick? You there, Renee?
Hi, everyone. Yes, we will be doing that tomorrow. I can pull up the time and I can send that around to the audience that joined today so they can all have that link.
I encourage you to attend that webinar as well. You'll get it from the horse's mouth. It's unbelievable. Carol, I know we need to wrap up here pretty soon. What do we need to do? What kind of action we need to take? You're on mute, Carol. Sorry.
Thanks. Sorry about that. We've only done about 1,000 of these. You'd think by now I'd figure out that the little icon up here. So we desperately need for you to submit letters to your editor, talk to your friends, neighbors, and colleagues, post something on your social media. If you need information, one, you can contact anyone in our office and we will gladly get you. We'll write the letters for you. You don't have to worry about that. If you want us to write a letter that's crafted for you or your business, and then you can certainly take your ability to mark it up, but we'll do the legwork for you in that case. But anything you can do to help us say vote no on 2.
And John, one last thing, tell them a little bit about the minimum wage task force, if anyone wants to get involved.
Absolutely. We've got people all over our great state helping out. We've broken our task force into 4 different cornerstones. We've got fundraising, legislative, where we're reaching out and getting help from our legislators. We've got grassroots, talking, as Lisa said, to every committee, every Tiger Bay, every Rotary Club that we possibly can. And then we've got fundraising. What's the most important? We need the fundraising. So please join us. We have meetings once a week or once every other week. We get together and you'll find out what we're fighting for, where we're out in the community, and how we're getting our message out. So we need as many people on this task force that are spreading the word. And as I said, we've got restaurateurs that don't think it affects them. I talked to one in Southwest Florida this past Friday, and he says, well, it doesn't affect my servers. They're all at $35 and $40 an hour. And I said, it does. I mean, we just got to change the comprehension. It's just, we all think, oh my gosh, I'm paying my people plenty of money. My back of the house is $13 to $18, so it won't affect me at all. It will change everything. Everything.
Well, with that, I think we need to wrap it up. Carol, unless you have any last pieces of advice. Renee, do you have anything before we close? I want to thank our panelists, John, Lisa, and Carol, for jumping on the call this morning. And again, have any questions, go to frla.org, hit minimum wage. There's all kinds of information on there. Thank you, everybody.
Great help. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Renee.